I don't think he ever loved my mom the way I hoped, but on that camping trip, he gave me something unexpected, the freedom to be myself. You know what's worse than being called a fgot by your stepdad in the middle of the woods? Knowing he's probably not wrong about why you're really here. I laughed. Bitterly. Too loud for how silent the forest was. The pines swayed overhead like they were ducking out of the conversation. Below them, I stood with a cracked Nalgene bottle, sweat drying on my back, trying to hold it together in front of a man who barely looked me in the eye, unless it was to correct me. Mike. My mom's husband for 6 years. My stepdad for 6 years. Not dad. Never that. This was supposed to be a bonding trip. Some last-ditch idea mom had cooked up because you boys need to spend time together. A camping trip in the Catskills. 3 days. 2 tents. One awkward drive full of static and muttered directions. And now, we were here. Day 2. I was tired. I stank. And I had just accidentally come out. Well, not accidentally. Maybe I wanted him to know. Maybe I wanted to see if anything he said would surprise me. Maybe I was just sick of keeping my voice too soft or my eyes down whenever he made one of those jokes around his hunting buddies. Maybe I was hoping that this trip might finally be the moment he stopped acting like I was some alien thing orbiting his normal life. Spoiler, he didn't. He just blinked at me like I'd told him I had cancer. Then took a swig of beer and said, "Well, that's a damn shame for your mama." And that's when I said, "She already knows. And she's proud of me." And that's when he said, "Of course she is. She thinks TikTok is the Bible." So yeah. That's how day 2 started. We hiked in silence for another hour after that, him stomping ahead like a man trying to outwalk his own discomfort. Me trailing behind, wondering if I was being brave or just stupid. We stopped to eat at a rocky overlook. The view was perfect. But I barely tasted the sandwich. Every time I tried to bite down, I remembered the way his lip curled when I said I liked guys. I remembered the way he didn't argue, didn't shout, just looked disappointed. Like he'd expected it all along. Like it confirmed something rotten in me he'd already suspected. "Your mom never made you do sports, huh?" he asked suddenly, unwrapping a Slim Jim. I paused. "No. That's what I figured. Would have done you some good. Toughened you up." "I'm not soft," I said too fast. He gave me a look. A half smirk. "Didn't say you were." But he didn't have to. That look said everything. And here's the thing, there were a million things I wanted to say. About how I'd taken care of mom when she had her hysterectomy last year. About how I worked 2 part-time jobs to save for college. About how I built my own damn computer from scraps and won a statewide coding competition. But all he saw was a boy who liked boys. So I just looked back at the mountains. And said nothing. That night, I sat by the campfire alone. He had gone off to take a piss or smoke or sulk. The trees around me crackled softly in the breeze. I stared into the flames, watching the logs hiss and pop. And then I cried. Not loud. Just quietly, like the fire was the only thing listening. I didn't cry because I was gay. I cried because I thought maybe, just maybe, he could be more than a placeholder in my life. That this trip might change something. Instead, it just confirmed that I was on my own. Until I heard him behind me. "You put that fire together nice," he said. I wiped my eyes fast. "Yeah. I watched a video." He nodded and sat down beside me. "Not close. But closer than before." "I ever tell you about my brother?" he said after a pause. "No," I said. "He was a dancer. Not like ballet or any of that crap. Like breakdancing. In the 90s. Before TikTok." I blinked. Okay. People said the same things about him they're saying about you now. I swallowed. He wasn't gay. Or maybe he was. I don't know. Never asked. He got beat up a lot. I didn't help him. I should've. Silence. Then he said, when he died, I thought about that a lot. What I could have done different. It doesn't go away. That feeling. I didn't say anything. Because suddenly, I didn't know what to say. And then he looked at me, and his voice got low. I ain't good at this. I didn't grow up with people talking about feelings. Hell, I still think therapy's just paying someone to pretend to like you. But I don't hate you. I just don't know how to talk to you. That cracked something in me. You don't have to talk, I said. You just have to listen. He looked at me like that was the hardest thing anyone had ever asked him. But he nodded. And that night, I told him. Not everything. But enough. I told him about the first boy I ever liked. The way I'd felt broken for months afterward when he ghosted me. I told him about the fear every time someone used the word freak in the locker room. About the time I saw two guys kiss in public and thought, God, I want that and I'm terrified of it. He didn't interrupt. He just sipped his beer, watching the fire like it was writing our story in smoke. When I finished, he said, that's a lot. And for once, it didn't feel like judgment. Just acknowledgement. The next morning, we hiked again. No words. But something felt different. He didn't walk as far ahead. He pointed out bird calls. Showed me how to check the direction of the sun. Little things. At lunch, he gave me half his Snickers without saying a word. And then, near the end of the trail, we passed a couple coming the other way. Two men. Holding hands. I froze. Mike saw them too. They smiled. Said, morning. Kept walking. I waited for the comment. The joke. The sneer. But all he said was, brave guys. And he kept walking. I stood there for a second. Then followed him. Maybe he didn't love my mom the way she needed. Maybe he never would. But on that trail, in that moment, he gave me something I hadn't expected. He gave me a little room to breathe. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe I could make it. Maybe I didn't need his approval. But damn, it still meant something. We didn't talk about that moment with the couple again. Not that day. Not the next. But I thought about it. Over and over. The way Mike's eyes didn't narrow. The way his mouth didn't twist. Just that simple phrase, brave guys. It clung to me like pine smoke. The last night of the trip, the fire burned low. Our tents were zipped up, our gear mostly packed. Tomorrow we'd hike out early and head back downstate. Back to Mom. Back to the cluttered kitchen and creaky floors. Back to the silence that usually wrapped around Mike and me like an overwashed blanket worn thin and full of holes. But something in the air that night buzzed different. He was fidgeting more than usual, nursing his beer like it was an apology. I was scrolling my phone in the tent vestibule, pretending to laugh at memes I couldn't focus on. Then he said it. You think your mom would be happier if I wasn't around? I didn't look up right away. Because that wasn't just a question. That was the first honest thing he'd said about her in years. I don't know, I answered. But I think she's tired of pretending everything's okay. He nodded slowly. Yeah. That sounds about right. And then he surprised me again. She tells me she loves me. Every day. But it feels like I'm wearing someone else's jacket. You know. Fits close enough, but it's not really mine. I didn't know what to say to that. So I asked something I never thought I'd ask. Did you ever love her? He didn't answer for a long time. The crickets took over the conversation. I think I tried to, he said finally. But she always looked at me like I was less than the guy who left. Like I was the consolation prize. I flinched. Because that was my dad he was talking about. A man I barely knew. A man who disappeared before I could spell his name right. She never said that, I murmured. She didn't have to. And in that moment, something clicked for me. We were both ghosts in that house. Just haunting different corners of the same unfinished story. He threw another log onto the fire. It crackled, sending sparks upward like questions neither of us could answer. I wanted to be better, he muttered. But I don't know how to be the guy you need. You don't need to be the guy, I said. Just stop being the wall I have to climb every time I want to breathe. He looked over. And for once, I think he heard me. Really heard me. Okay, he said. Softly. Roughly. Okay. We didn't hug. That wasn't us. But when he passed me the last can of soda, I knew it was as close as he could get to saying I'm trying. The ride home was quiet, but it was a better quiet. Not tense. Not hostile. Just still. We took the long way back. Stopped at some roadside diner that looked like it hadn't updated its menu since Bush Sr. was president. He let me pick the music. That was new. I played Phoebe Bridgers. I figured he'd complain, but he just stared out the window and said, "Sounds sad." I shrugged. She is. Ha, he grunted. Ain't we all? And maybe it was the road, or the altitude, or the weirdness of him not mocking my playlist, but I found myself smiling. A little. When we got home, Mom was waiting in the doorway. Sunglasses on. Hair in that messy braid she wore on laundry days. She hugged me first. Long and tight. Like she'd been worried something might break between us out there. Then she turned to Mike. Everything go okay? He nodded. Yeah. We didn't kill each other. High bar, she said, half laughing. But I caught the relief in her eyes. That night, he offered to do the dishes after dinner. Mom blinked like he'd suggested skydiving. I nearly dropped my fork. He didn't say much after. Just ruffled my hair awkwardly before heading to bed. It was weird. But not bad. A week later, I came out to my classmates. Not in a grand way. Just stopped hiding. Wore the rainbow bracelet to school. Spoke up when someone used "gay" as a punchline. Let people see me without filtering it. Some friends got weird. Others surprised me. One girl Jade texted me after lunch and said, "You're braver than any guy I know." That made me cry in the bathroom for 10 minutes. But it was a good cry. One afternoon, I came home to find Mike in the garage, sanding a piece of wood. He looked up, saw me in the doorway, and said, "Come here a sec." I hesitated. Then walked in. He handed me a folded piece of paper. Looked like it had been through the wash at least twice. "What's this?" I asked. He scratched the back of his neck. Found it while cleaning out my truck. Something my brother wrote before he died. I unfolded it. Read it. It was a poem. Short. Ragged. Full of spelling errors. But it hit me like a freight train. It ended with, "I want to dance in the open, not behind closed doors. I want to be known, not just forgiven." I didn't say anything. Just held it. Mike took a deep breath. He never got that. The being known part. "Maybe you will." Then he picked up his sander again and went back to work. Mom told me a month later that Mike had suggested they go to therapy. "I think he's changing," she said, not quite believing it herself. I nodded. So are we, I said. And somewhere between college applications, late-night texts with the boy from biology class, and surprise dinners where Mike actually asked me how school was going, I realized something. The man I once feared would never understand me was starting to ask questions instead of throwing up walls. He didn't become perfect. He didn't become my best friend. But he showed up. And when you grow up hiding parts of yourself, sometimes showing up is the most radical thing a person can do. The next summer, we went camping again. Same place. Same trail. Only this time, I packed an extra wristband. Rainbow stripes. I handed it to him the second night by the fire. He looked confused. What's this for? I shrugged. Just in case you forget, I'm not going anywhere. He stared at it for a long second. Then slipped it over his wrist without a word. And when we passed another couple on the trail the next day, two girls laughing, hands clasped, nodded at them. And when they were out of earshot, he said, "They look happy." And this time, I didn't flinch. Because so did I. Summer ended the way it always does, too fast, like someone yanking the sheets off a bed before you're ready to wake up. Senior year began with the usual mess. Crowded hallways, new teachers pretending they weren't already over it, and kids clinging to whatever image of themselves they'd carefully curated over break. I walked in that first morning wearing a denim jacket with a tiny pride pin on the collar. Nothing dramatic. Just honest. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to explain it to anyone. It was subtle, but the world started treating me differently. Or maybe I just stopped ducking when it did. Tyson, this tall, soft-spoken kid from chemistry, started sitting with me at lunch. We'd never talked much before, but one afternoon, he leaned over and said, "I saw your Instagram post over the summer. With the campfire. It was brave." I laughed. It was mostly mosquito bites and awkward silences. He smiled. Still brave. We hung out after school the next day. Then again that weekend. Nothing romantic at first. Just two boys orbiting something they weren't sure had gravity yet. But it did. And slowly, it pulled us in. Meanwhile, Mike kept showing up in quiet ways. One night, I found him Googling non-binary at the kitchen table. He looked like a kid caught with a bad report card when I walked in. "Just trying to understand," he muttered, pushing the screen away. I didn't say anything. Just nodded and sat down beside him with my cereal. Later, I realized it wasn't about labels for him, it was about keeping the door open. Not slamming it shut like he used to. Mom noticed the changes, too. There was less yelling. Less secondhand bitterness. One night she came into my room and sat on the edge of my bed like she used to when I was little. "You know," she said softly, "he reads your texts over your shoulder sometimes." "What?" I blurted. "Not in a creepy way," she rushed. "Just smiling at them. He asks about Tyson. Asks if you're happy." I blinked. "He never says anything. Some people say more by staying, sweetie." And I realized she was right. Mike didn't have the words yet, but he was trying to live them. Tyson kissed me for the first time under the bleachers after a football game neither of us watched. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't slow motion. It was better. It was real. I pulled back, heart thudding, breath shaky. "You okay?" He grinned. "I've wanted to do that since we built that volcano in Chem Lab." I laughed, too stunned to speak. And when I got home that night, eyes glassy, face flushed, I walked straight past the living room where Mike and Mom were watching some boring procedural and whispered, "I kissed someone." Mom beamed. Mike raised an eyebrow. "Good kisser." I flushed crimson. "Mike," Mom hissed, smacking his arm. He chuckled. "What?" "It's a valid question." And just like that, it became a thing I didn't have to hide. There were stumbles, of course. There always are. One day, someone carved FAG into my locker. Deep. Ugly. I stared at it for a full minute before touching the letters. My fingers shook. Tyson saw it. He clenched his jaw, took a photo, and marched to the principal's office. I followed, numb. They filed a report. Promised to investigate. Promised consequences. But the letters stayed there all week. A scar the school didn't rush to erase. I didn't cry. But that night, I couldn't eat. Mike noticed. After dinner, he handed me a small metal scraper. Let's fix it. I stared. What? He nodded. Come on. I got a flashlight. So we drove to the school in silence, parked around the back, and snuck inside. He flicked on the flashlight and aimed it at the locker like we were hunting something dangerous. Then he started scraping. Hard. Angry. He didn't speak. Just scrubbed like he was trying to erase every slur he'd ever laughed at in his life. When he stepped back, sweating and red-faced, the letters were gone. Just faint scratches remained. I whispered, "Thank you." He handed me the scraper. "Next time, you do it. But not alone." And I knew what he meant. Not just the locker. Life. Spring came. So did college acceptances. I got into a place upstate. Not too far. Enough distance to breathe. Tyson got into the same one. We screamed in the cafeteria when we found out. Mike surprised me that night with a printed list, grocery budgets, used textbook sites, even LGBTQ-friendly campus housing stats. "I've been doing some reading," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "You planning to come to orientation with me?" He shrugged. "Only if you want me to." I didn't know what to say. So I just hugged him. He froze for half a second. Then slowly hugged me back. Graduation came and went in a blur of sweaty gowns and Polaroids. Tyson held my hand the entire ceremony. When they called my name, I looked out into the crowd. Mom was crying. Mike was standing beside her, clapping hard. He was wearing the rainbow wristband. My knees buckled a little. Afterward, we posed for photos. He wrapped an arm around me and whispered, "You did it, kid." I grinned. We did. And I meant it. A week before move-in day, we went camping one last time. Just me and Mike. No grand speeches. No breakdowns. Just the sound of birds and the crackle of fire and the quiet between us. The last morning, he handed me a folded piece of paper. "Same as last time." "What is it?" I asked. He shrugged. "You'll read it when you're ready." I nodded and stuffed it in my backpack. I didn't open it until 3 weeks into college. Alone, homesick, overwhelmed, and missing everything, even the annoying sound of his boots on the trail. The note read, "You're not what I expected. You're better. I don't always get it. But I get you. Proud of you. Even when I'm silent. Keep dancing. Love, Mike." I cried for a long time after that. Not because I was sad. But because I had spent so many years believing love had to look like something it didn't. Tyson and I made a good team. We fought sometimes about laundry, about space, about what to name our pet lizard. But we were a team. And every time I called home, Mike asked about him. "How's the lizard boy? Did he finally fix that squeaky door? You treating him right?" Once, I teased, "You like him more than me, don't you?" He just chuckled. "I don't play favorites." But yeah. Years passed. We visited home less often, but every time we did, he waited with a bear hug and new stories. About a kid he helped at work who came out. About a book he read by a trans author. About how he sometimes still dreamed about his brother dancing in the kitchen. And one winter, he gave me a necklace. Simple. Plain. A silver pendant in the shape of a flame. For the fire you kept alive, he said. I wore it every day after. I never stopped being gay. He never stopped being flawed. But we kept choosing each other. Again and again. And I think that's the closest thing to love there is. When he died quietly, in his sleep, years later found a folder in his desk. Labeled, Things I Never Said Out Loud. Inside were old notes. Half-finished letters. Memories. Articles. Pride flags folded like secrets. And at the very back, a photo. Me. Age 17. Standing by the fire on our first trip. Underneath it, scribbled in his messy handwriting. That night, he changed me. And I hope I changed him, too. I think he did. And I hope he knew. We buried him in early autumn. The trees hadn't turned yet, but the wind already carried that dry, whispering chill. The kind that slips down your collar and makes you think of all the things you meant to say before time ran out. It wasn't a big funeral. Mike didn't want that. Just a few close friends from work, some family we hadn't seen in years, and Uzmi, Mom, Tyson. And in my coat pocket, the note he once gave me, "You're not what I expected. You're better." I kept running my thumb over the creased edge, like maybe if I rubbed hard enough, I could press his voice back into the paper. Tyson squeezed my hand when I couldn't speak. Mom wore the flame pendant I'd given her after he passed. She hadn't taken it off since. At the burial site, I read a few words. Nothing fancy. Just true. I used to think he'd never see me. Never know me. But he did. In his own way. Maybe that's all we can hope for, that the people in our lives start out confused and end up trying. He tried. And I'll never stop being grateful for that. No one clapped. No one had to. The silence felt like enough. Later, we went through his garage. Tools lined the walls. Coffee cans filled with screws, nails, wires. A whole world he'd built with calloused hands and quiet determination. In the corner, we found a wooden box. Small, carefully sanded, with a little rainbow carved into the lid. Inside were mementos, pieces of a story he never told all at once. My first drawing, signed with crayon, me and Mike and the tent. A ticket stub from the diner where we ate after our first camping trip. A photo of me and Tyson at graduation, arms linked, both beaming. And one final note. Written in pen, dated just a month before he died. Some people find God in church. Some in music. I found mine in a kid who made me see the world differently. He taught me how to be proud, not just tolerant. If I did one thing right, let it be him. I couldn't stop the tears then. They came fast, hot, and heavy. Tyson just pulled me into his chest and held me until I could breathe again. I think he loved you the best way he knew how, Tyson whispered. I think so too, I said. In the spring, we planted a tree at the trailhead of the old camping ground. It was Tyson's idea. A small sugar maple, roots wrapped in burlap, bought with money Mike once stashed in a jar labeled, "For someday." We dug the hole by hand. When it was done, we stood back and looked at it. Just a thin little thing. Bare branches. Fragile. But it would grow. That's what mattered. I knelt beside it and buried something at the roots, Mike's rainbow wristband. The one he wore, year after year, until the colors faded but the meaning never did. Thank you, I whispered. For the fire. For the fight. For the chance to be seen. Tyson and I moved to the city that summer. A small apartment with cracked windows and the loudest neighbors imaginable. But it had a balcony. And every night, we sat out there watching the lights blink on across the skyline. One evening, I pulled out my laptop and started writing down the story. Not just about Mike. But about everything coming out, being terrified, being loved anyway. I called it, What He Gave Me. It wasn't polished. It wasn't fancy. But it was mine. I posted it online. Forgot about it. Until it went viral. Thousands of people read it. Shared it. Sent messages. I wish my dad could have read this. You gave me hope. He sounds like a man who learned to love out loud. And suddenly, I realized Mike wasn't gone. He was in every story I told. In every boy learning to breathe without shame. In every father who read those words and chose, finally, to listen. Years later, I stood on a stage at a youth center. A microphone. A rainbow backdrop. A room full of kids who were just like I once was, scared, soft-spoken, unsure. I told them about the woods. The fire. The word fag carved into my locker. The day it got scraped away. The day I kissed someone without flinching. The day I believed love didn't have to look like a movie to be real. And when I finished, a boy raised his hand. Couldn't have been more than 14. Glasses, freckles, trembling voice. Do you think people like that can really change? I smiled. I don't just think they can. I know they can. Because I saw it. Because I lived it. Because I was loved by it. Mike never got to read the published version of the story. He never saw the book deal, or the speaking gigs, or the emails from teachers asking to read my words in classrooms. But he didn't need to. He knew. He knew when he picked up that rainbow bracelet and wore it in front of the whole town. He knew when he scraped hate off my locker like it offended him. He knew when he looked at Tyson and said, "You're a good one. Don't mess it up." He knew when he built that little box, one memory at a time. And I'll carry that knowing for the rest of my life. We visit the tree every year. It's tall now. Full. Strong. Just like I am. And at its base, wildflowers grow in the spring. A patch of color, soft and stubborn. Tyson always brings a stone to leave there. Says it helps him feel like part of something bigger. I bring letters. I bury them in the dirt. Some are long. Some are just a single sentence. You'd like the new apartment. I finally danced at a wedding. I wore your flannel today. Still smells like cedar. And sometimes, just sometimes, I think I hear his voice in the trees. Not words. Just warmth. Just fire. Just the freedom to be myself. The end. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.